knew us, they would say we were ideal. Couple with a lovely home, good children, and a stable existence. Yet you fail to notice the fractures till you're within the walls. The sense of emptiness is absent. Unless you are the living one. 4 years, Phoenix's work was his entire universe. He was often working late into the night. I used to persuade myself that weekends were holidays, that he completed the overtime for us. The dedication was made in honor of his life, constructing for our family, but following along that the narrative begins to unravel if no one lives there. What good is a house? I vanished from his view when he hardly gave me a glance when he got home, ceased inquiring about my desires and feelings. We briefly discussed what I required. Sentences primarily pertaining to goods and bills and Leonard, his beloved children, and his ISA, his younger sister, yet even with them his presence like a shadow. Nevertheless, I used to sit at the table opposite him, unsure if he still noticed me that morning. I recall being in the kitchen as Phoenix snatched the door and ran out. He kissed the top of Isa's briefcase head and gave me a single apologetic look. I'm unable to attend something today, Freya. Appeared at work and I didn't even dispute it. Simply nodded, as I always did in my throat. I reassured myself that everything was all right, Leonard. Then I may join our at the age of 16. Leonard was tall and lanky, with dark eyes similar to those of his father but with a gentler expression. He said little. Even after I assured him that it would only be, I believe he had grown accustomed to the two of us. He simply shrugged when his father also bailed, took the packages and trailed behind me to the I observed him in the passenger seat of the car. On the drive there, peering out with headphones the window like teenagers do all the time, couldn't resist grinning as he grew up so quickly, and occasionally I questioned whether I'd lose him if I blink. The drive to the shore seemed to go on forever. My thoughts drifted as they always did. Phoenix, I considered everything. We used to spend many evenings watching movies together. Treks and outings for pure enjoyment of it. I reflected on how he used to the way his eyes would light up when he touched me. I hadn't felt that insecure when he saw me. I hadn't felt anything for years, so weary of being unnoticed, we eventually made it, and Leonard assisted me in moving the suitcases to a peaceful area. I spread out the towels along the water. As he prepared the umbrella, I'm not sure why I just felt compelled to speak with him. Perhaps it was due to the fact that he was alone there. Perhaps all I needed was someone to listen. Don't you think it's good to get outside? Trying to appear upbeat, he just nodded, adjusting his hair with his "Yes, Mom, it's pleasant." I reclined on the towel, sensing that the sun's heat seeps into my flesh. Didn't move for some time, so I simply allowed myself remain motionless as if I were attempting to allow the burden of the previous few years is lifted away from me, even for an hour. But after that I sat up, remembered the oil and turned. "Could you please help me rub this on, Leonard?" I asked. "I can't reach it myself," behind my back. He gave me a brief, nearly intense stare. With hesitation, I took the bottle from I put my hand back down, facing the towel, and waited for the initial contact to be. His hands were uncertain, but they were soft. I grinned as if he didn't want to harm me. To myself, since it brought back memories of when he was younger, he used to hold my his hands were used to cross the street. Been so little in the past, then you can exert a little more pressure. Told him it was all right. My voice was muffled. His hands hardened as he listened. He massaged my shoulders with the oil. I closed my eyes and moved down my back. Tried to concentrate on the rhythm's warmth. I briefly allowed myself to be touched by him. Enjoy it, as it's been a long time I had been touched at all by someone, and that thought struck me more forcefully than I had intended. But suddenly I sensed his hands lowering, cautiously and slowly descending the curve of my breath froze in my throat as I turned around, and I started to say something but nothing popped into my head. But I convinced myself it was okay and remained silent. That he was only assisting me in fantasizing. But I did his hands not hover there for a moment? Close to the border of my towel concluded. I sensed his hesitancy. Could sense my own, and rather than I told him, "It's okay, you can stop him. Give it a rub." Additionally, the words lingered in the air like something toxic, and as soon as they left my lips, knowing that I couldn't handle them, Leonard didn't say anything in response. Continued. I either closed my eyes tightly and felt his hands were lower than they should have been on me. Then I thought my heart was thumping so fiercely. I wanted to go sit because I thought he might hear me. Up to advise him to stop, but I chose not to. I couldn't allow it to occur even now. I'm not sure why. It was the loneliness. Perhaps I was as well. Frantic to be appreciated even if it was incorrect, or perhaps I simply didn't give a damn. Everything that happened on the beach that day I broke inside. And everything would change forever. Again, if you've made it this far deep into the narrative, I'm grateful for staying with me, even though I know it's not simple something to hear, and thank you. If you're seeing this video, pay attention. Fascinating? Or if you believe there's someone who could identify with my situation, please take a moment to hit that share button. Such as a button, and I find that subscribing helps me stay on top of sharing tales such as these, which enables me to I am aware that I am not alone. Alright, let's return to something happened following that beach day. Changed, and I couldn't deny how I felt. Leonard's gaze on me, and what I saw, it wasn't merely a lasting effect after that look or a fleeting instant, it remained consistent. Whenever I looked him in the eye, there was something odd about him that I couldn't but didn't want to name. When we arrived there, I attempted to bury it. I did everything that night when I got home. I prepared dinner so I could appear normal. I folded and asked Leonard about school. Laundry, my hands. Late at night I continued to replay while trembling. All that took place in his hands, the how he persisted in the stress I experienced in my own body, which I detested, and I had him forgiving me this feeling regarding my own Phoenix. His son was unaware of anything. As usual, he arrived home late, his tie unfastened. His face was exhausted, so he kissed my cheek. Habit is only a shadow of its former self. I requested in the hopes of receiving some sort of He nodded and grumbled during the chat. It's halfway to the living room already. Was always this way, and his presence was felt. Like an after considering, and I felt invisible once more that evening. I lay in bed and gazed at the ceiling as Phoenix quietly gored. The house seemed quiet next to me. Yet my I couldn't stop thinking about regarding Leonard's hands and eyes. I knew I shouldn't have done it. Before it left, stop it, whatever it was. Any further, but there was still another section of me, something gloomy, something solitary that yearned for it and wanted to keep it, the focus, the touch, and the sensation of being observed. That the days went by without Leonard speak, but his quiet was more powerful than words. He didn't stay away from me. Precisely, yet it seemed as though he stayed if I were closer. I could see him observing me when I prepared while I was cleaning. At night, I sat by myself on the couch. And I didn't stop him. Instead, I let it happen. Continued. I then arrived the following weekend, and it was hot once more, and the home seemed stuffy. Phoenix had left to work a while ago. Leonard and I are left alone by the minute ship. Similar to when I asked him if he wished to return to the beach, only I don't know why I did it, but we did it together. Perhaps I assumed that going outside would be beneficial. Clear my head. Perhaps I wanted to take a test. Myself to test whether I could exert all of my effort. This time the drive was peaceful. However, Leonard did not wear his earplugs. He simply sat there and gazed out the window. His knee was bouncing. I wanted to say something restlessly. Anything to end the quiet. Yet each and every the word stuck as I opened my mouth. In my throat. When we arrived at the beach, it was nearly. I recall how blue the lake was when it was empty. Observed the sensation of the breeze on my face. Lay out the towels once again as you would prior. And Leonard assisted me in setting. I didn't ask him to mess everything up. This time I couldn't get the oil off my back. Rather, I closed my eyes and lay there, acting as though nothing was wrong. But even with my eyes closed, I could sense his stare. I sensed him observing. The actual breaking point for me happened later. We made the decision to rinse off that afternoon. Before returning home, taking a shower at the beach. It was intended to be rapid in order to obtain our skin with the sand. But something occurred at that time that I'm still unable to elucidate. Our arrival to the showers. Leonard first moved beneath, allowing the eye stood back and watched as water ran down his back. The side observing him for a while. I'm not sure before I walked into what overcame me, but I removed my outer garments and stood next to him. Water that cools against my skin. Leonard gave me a glance. I'm not sure if I was surprised or startled, misunderstanding or something else completely, but I looked at him, but he didn't say anything. Then gave him a serious look and stated, "You should also remove your shorts because you need to wash appropriately." I'm not sure why I said it. Perhaps I wished to demonstrate to myself that I could be in charge so that I could this halt, or perhaps I was putting him to the test. Testing. He pondered for a moment before followed my instructions to slide his shoes off, and we were by ourselves in the water there, raining down and cleaning everything away. Aside from what we were both sensing, I turned away from him and gently asked for assistance with my back. And he did his hands exercise caution once more? Similar to before, but there was no error. I could sense the strain in him. When he touched my waist, I felt the air appeared to thicken around the frozen, drowning out the sound of the ocean. Other than that, I could have left. I had the option to stop it, but I leaned back and got closer to him, for his hands directing them toward my chest, and he didn't pull when I did. I can't explain what happened next. I won't elaborate. It was a haze of a moment. Of loneliness and other things. I don't want to mention that it wasn't gentle, and it was desperate, not slow. Passionately incorrect in every manner, but I didn't want to stop it, but I couldn't. And we simply stood there when it was over. The water continues to fall down on us, removing the proof yet leaving the truth, then held me as if I weren't. I guided him, and no one else had in years. After that, we dried off and didn't talk. Packed things and made their way back to the vehicle, and in silence, I observed Leonard from in the corner of my eye. His face reddened. Hard movements. I realized I had ruined. I was aware that we would cross a line that was impossible to uncross. And yet for the first time in years I felt alive. The initial ride home was quiet. The car seemed too heavy and too little. The air itself was weighing us down. Firmly grasped the steering wheel, attempting to concentrate on the road, but my thoughts was whirling, and I could sense him, Leonard's hands, the weight of his body. I kept everything we had just done. Glances in the passenger seat at him. He sat still in the seat, gazing out the window, his jaw turned red. Nodded, and then suddenly he said, "Mom." He began in a quiet, almost uncertain voice. I was unable to look at him, yet I heard him explain what had just transpired. My heart skipped a beat there. For a brief while I considered acting. He said to brush it off, but I didn't hear that. Shift in topic, but there's no need in acting now, not after what we did. I drew a trembling breath and replied, "I'm not sure if that was the truth, or the closest thing I can find." Didn't understand why or what had happened. I was aware that everything was different. We didn't speak again till we arrived at. I switched off the automobile in the driveway, but finally, neither of us moved. Leonard gazed at me intently, and for when I first noticed anything in the eyes that frightened me weren't confused, or shame, or even guilt. It was, "How long have you been feeling this way?" His words shot shivers down my spine. Me, since I had been asking myself the same question. Query. I glanced at him at that moment, and it was, I don't know, but it felt like a dam broke inside of me. I muttered for a little while longer than I wanted to admit that. After that, we were both quiet. As I sat there in the dark, I believed that would we walk inside and attempt to put everything aside and act as though nothing had occurred, but Leonard had different plans. He leaned before I could open the door over and gave me a gentle kiss at first. He seemed to be worried that I would withdraw. However, I allowed him to kiss me, and I gave him a kiss back, and I don't know why I lost control. Determine whether the year's loneliness was the cause of disregard or Leonard's perspective on me, as anyone has in a long time, but I allow it to occur directly outside our. Leonard drew me into his residence, hands moving over me as if they were supposed to. I felt alive, wanted there. First time in years that I've seen. Didn't give a damn about anything otherwise. I'm not sure how long we stayed, like though they were entangled in one another, but eventually, I don't know, we moved inside. Recall a lot of the doorway walk. Simply the sensation of his hand on mine between us. The silence buzzes like we didn't talk. We didn't have electricity. Need to after we entered every room. Intensified as if we had been holding back too long. And at last the dam had explosion, and the days that followed were a jumble. Leonard never left my side, looking for excuses to criticize me or take a look at me when no one else is around. I would remind myself to pause and move away in order to conclusion whatever it was, but each time I saw the same loneliness when I glanced at him. It seemed to me that we were reflections of each other's reflection of the identical neat the same void. And I was unable to refuse. I didn't desire I would lie in bed next to them at night. Phoenix is listening while gazing at the connection. I would assume based on the sound of his breathing regarding Leonard in the adjacent room, regarding the how he made me feel and how his hands felt alive once more. After which I would shut my chest, my eyes guilt curling up like a serpent. I was aware that it couldn't endure. Was incorrect, but I was unable to halt the increase in our tension. Stronger each day until it eventually Phoenix. It was late one evening when it detonated. Was back at work. ISA was sleeping, and I was in the kitchen with Leonard, trying to focus while doing the dishes when I sensed him behind me. I turned everything off. When I turned back, he was staring at me. In the same manner as he had on I murmured softly, "Beach Leonard," attempting to warn him, but he continued and took a step. His breath was so close that I could feel it. "On my he's a neck, mama," muttered. "I can't get this out of my head. My heart was thumping so hard that I froze. Believed it might I wanted to tell him to stop and leave, but returning to his room to get away from me. But I did not, but rather I gazed up at him and I stated what I shouldn't have said. Unable to stop either way, and that was the situation. The instant everything collapsed, Leonard gave me another, more intense kiss. I kissed him because I was desperate this time. Back, I didn't give a damn that it was incorrect. Didn't give a damn about Aya, Phoenix, or all I cared about was the life we had created. My kid Leonard is the only one who gave me the impression that I was important ever since that beach day. The situation hasn't returned to normal in truth. I doubt that they ever will. We cross the first line together, Leonard and I. Something, no matter how tried, cannot be removed. I attempt to persuade myself. Otherwise, what began as an instant has changed into something I am unable to control. The crushing guilt. Constant, but I'm not deterred by it, and that's what frightens me the most. I mostly glance at my spouse, Phoenix, and my daughter Aa daily, and I'm curious as to how they fail to notice it is beyond them. The fissures extending across. Perhaps our family is too preoccupied in their personal lives to witness me faltering, or perhaps I've simply become more adept at hiding things, but I know in my heart that this cannot continue. Secrets always manage to surface, and the fallout will occur when they do. Demolish. I've told about everything. I've tried to stop, repeatedly reminding myself that this is incorrect, that Leonard is deserving of better, I'm worthy of better. But every time he looks at me, he touches me. Like though I'm the only individual on the planet who lose, he gives me a sense of aliveness that I not felt in years, possibly ever. And I have to live with that reality. I'm not sure how to resolve this. I'm not sure whether I can solve it. And that's why I'm telling you my story. There is someone out there with a solution. Anything I hadn't considered. Perhaps you can show me how to get out of. I made this mess before it was too late. Therefore, if you have any advice, please been in a similar circumstance or are aware of someone whose voice, I'd like to hear you, and, at the very least, make this a caution that loneliness makes you to locations you never imagined visiting. Don't allow yourself to get lost the way I did. Allow your world to collapse in front of you. Understand what's going on, because there's no turning back once you cross that line. I appreciate you listening. Please tell us what you think of this video. If it was useful to you, please subscribe, for I need to know more than I'm not. Sometimes the largest betrayals are committed alone. Aren't the ones we do to other people, but the ones that we do to ourselves. Whom